Welcome to another video of Elevenvation. Again, the name Elevenvation comes from me seeing the time 11:11. I've been seeing the time 11:11 for probably 11 years plus, but I've been seeing the time 11:11 for probably about since like 2007. And then just seeing that time, I just always ask, why am I seeing this? And just to line it up with biblical scripture, the Bible always talk about the 11th hour, the hour, the final hour before the Son of Man, Jesus, to return to this earth. And during that time, of course, Revelation speaks about how things would get worse and, dealing with the tribulation and all those things that come along with it. So for a while I used to run from 11:11 because I was seeing it in prison and I didn't want the world to end while I was incarcerated, so I wanted to be out, just being honest. But I was seeing it even upon my release 3 years ago. I was still kind of running from it, but then I thought about scripture. I thought about the importance of people needing to be informed of the times that we're in, and that's what made me put together this YouTube channel. I've been around various churches and stuff, and although all of them serve their purpose, I like to deal directly with the individual because it doesn't matter what we preach in pulpits and stuff like that if it's not personal. So I like to take my own personal struggles and stuff like that because I know I'm not the only one to go through these things. So I made 11:11vation as it was going to be 11 minutes of elevation, which means 11 minutes of encouraging words to lift you up. That's where the term vation comes from. It's more like elevation, and it's a play on the 11th hour. So to be encouraged during these final moments on how to be secure in your faith, you as a person, to deal with Satan and his challenges, the adversity that we may face on a day-to-day basis from family members, children, supervisors, or just random people at stoplights and in grocery stores. Satan has its way of trying to get in. So in this time where everyone seems to be more selfish, and this time where people become more lovers of themselves, and this time where we all want to say we are a God and we speak things into existence and that we're going to prosper, don't nobody talk about the struggle or how to get through the struggle. So that's the purpose of this channel. Again, I have various YouTube videos on here, and I've always encouraged that if you have questions that you can always post it, and I get back as soon as I can. For the most part, I would do a video for the questions that require answers that's more in depth. A lot of things could get mixed up as far as just texting and messaging back and forth and everything else like that. So I like to just keep it as clear as possible. But Lakeisha Reed, she had a variety of questions, and I mentioned that I would answer them. So I'm answering the questions, but the questions she asked more so pertain to a youth mentoring program that I had started that no longer exists because of COVID. But it was called Warzone. I was going to MPS schools and speaking to troubled youth classes, or teachers would just call me and tell me that their class has been acting up, and they knew my history. They knew I had just got out. These are people that I've known for years. And they just called me to come in and talk to the class. So in that video, I actually looked super uptight. But believe it or not, I wasn't uptight with the class. I was more so uptight with the way of this world, because the people in that class, those children, I seen those children come into the prison. Well, what does that mean? Same attitude, same mindset, different person. And a lot of times, the same attitude, same mindset breeds the same results. So I was more upset that those kids at that age thought they knew what they were talking about. I'm 44. Half the time I still don't know what I'm talking about. So to see that those kids had some of the responses and mindsets and stuff, and they just thought that they just knew, it was more of a righteous anger, an anger that to where I knew what the end result was, and they were being deceived, and that bothered me. So I'm gonna jump into the questions. So one of the first questions from Lakeisha Reed, it said, at what part of your journey did you realize your past actions had a major impact on your future and the community? Believe it or not, I knew right when it happened. I have done 18 years on 35 for gun violence. I was released February of 2019. And since I've been out, my whole thing has been to try to change the mindset of the young people. Because when I was incarcerated over those years, as years went by, the people that were coming to prison were getting younger and younger and younger. And I became an old school in prison. And when I went to prison in 2000, when I first went in, there were older guys there that was trying to mentor the younger guys. But as time persists in prison, the older guys started acting like the young guys. So there was no more old school people that were actually trying to deter the young people from being or thinking the way that they were, because they was getting out and coming right back. One person within my first 7 years, 7 to 10 years, I seen this one guy get out and come back like 4 or 5 times. He thought that he could do something. He thought that he can come up with a better way to be successful committing crime. It just doesn't make sense. But that's the nature of that system. But the thing is we can't blame the system. At the end of the day, it's our mindset. We can't blame political parties. At the end of the day, it's a personal problem. We could try to politicize the situation and Republican, Democrat, and this and that, whatever. When it's a sin problem. It's a personal problem that derived from sin. We always look for other people to take care of our own problems. For one, these politicians isn't living in these neighborhoods. We are. These politicians' children isn't going to these schools. Our children are. So we can't look for someone on the outside to try to do something on the inside when we need to deal with the people on the inside. Anyway, that's a whole nother thing. So I'm going to answer these questions. I had a habit of getting sidetracked sometimes, so forgive me for that. So anyway, I'm going to jump right off into the first question again. At what part of your journey did you realize your past actions had a major impact on your future in the community? Well, like I said, right when it happened. Because when it happened, some people looked at it and they glorified the violent aspect of it. You have rap music, well, not just rap music, but you got rock music, you got R&B. It's a variety of music that kids listen to nowadays that crime and things of that nature is just glorified in the music. But if these artists was doing exactly what they said they're doing, then they'd be incarcerated as well, because they putting all their business out there. But it's crazy that the youth believe what they're hearing. They believe what they're seeing on TV and in these movies in their Hollywood script, only to know that the end result, is dead or in jail. So at that moment, I realized my future was going to be challenged. I knew that eventually I was going to get caught. I knew that someone in that neighborhood, I knew that someone in the neighborhood that witnessed it was going to glorify it. Although they may not see my change or know my deepest struggle behind it all, they may have went off, and the fact that they saw me do that, I have put some type of impression on them where they probably think that I'm okay with what happened, and I never was okay with it. So they could go off glorifying it and act in the way that they see me act in that one split moment because they believe that was to be true. And because of that, it made me become more aware of the examples I set in front of people. Because ultimately we are examples, and people need to see patience. People need to see love. People need to see compassion. I mean, I can't go back and undo what I did. I can't beat up on myself about what happened, regardless of how it happened, regardless of who was at fault and all this and all that. It doesn't matter. It was a situation that was preventable. Either if my mindset was different or if maybe somebody would have intervened. Um, so at that point in time, I knew that my future wasn't going to be the same, and I knew that some changes had to take place. So the next question is, did you ever think you would be a mentor to impact, having a major impact in your community? No. I started taking the younger guys under my wing when I was in prison, and I just realized that what I was doing was mentoring. I had realized that as I went from one prison to the other prison, that there were no more old school guys around, and I'm like, where the old schools at? Because I was looking to gravitate to one of them because I wanted to continue to learn, because I wanted to get out of prison and not go back. So I was looking to someone who had the availability and even the care to try to enlighten me about based on their experiences to help me deal with mine. So as I went from one prison to the other, those type of individuals started to diminish. And before I knew it, I had been down for 10 plus years and I became the old school. So I'm like, well, if you're looking for someone to do it, why don't you do it? A lot of times we look for other people to do things when if there's so much in front of our mind that somebody need to do this, somebody need to do that, then maybe it's you. Maybe it's me that need to do it. So I started doing it, but I knew that at that point in time, I had to be honest with myself in order to get someone else to open up. I had to open up to myself. So during that time, I had to evaluate my mindset. I had to identify my strengths and my weaknesses, all my insecurities, and I shared them. And when I shared them with the younger guys in there, that hardcore shell broke down because they seen that I was willing to be vulnerable, and they didn't open up right away. But once I seen that they was accepting me being vulnerable, I seen that it was penetrating, and slowly they opened up. And when those individuals opened up, those were the ones that didn't come back to prison because they knew what their strengths and weaknesses were, and they knew to avoid exposing themselves to something that they may not be able to handle until they get strong enough to handle it. It's no different than you having the house and knowing that your back door don't lock. The front door locked, the windows locked, everything else is fine, but that back door, it just don't lock. And if you knew the enemy was trying to get in to get to you, you're going to stay up all night and keep your eye on that back door until you know it's secure. Because you will find comfort in knowing that that door is secure when you know that you are there and aware of any invasions. And it's the same thing when we look at ourselves mentally, emotionally, and more importantly, spiritually. There's a spiritual invasion to where Satan tried to come in and get into our minds. And if we have certain doors that's not guarded properly, that's how the enemy come in. And that door could be the very same weakness that weakness could be the door that Satan used, and the weakness could be relationships. Just hypothetically speaking, there's a variety of them, but I'm just going to use relationships. If we have the tendency to want to chase relationships and we don't understand the weakness behind some of the characteristics based on how we grew up to make us believe a relationship should be a certain way, but then we chase these relationships and we expose ourselves to things we can't handle, and we don't even know why the outcome is continuously in the manner in which it is. And it's because we may have some situation in our past that we haven't dealt with, some things that we gravitate to. Your earliest childhood memory, you remember it for a reason. And I guarantee that your earliest childhood memory has something to do with who you are today, the good and the bad. And I'm pretty sure your earliest childhood memory has affected your perspective on life and the way of the world. until we are enlightened and understand how Satan hath used those early traumatic experiences to scar us, and to bring us into bondage, and to believe that things should be a certain way or things are only a certain way. So it took me evaluating that, opening it up and sharing it, and that caused guys to open up to me, and before I knew it, I was mentoring. So when I got out of prison, I knew that the schools was where it had to start. Okay. So when did your thought process begin to transition from this life is not for me? What was the first actions you did to change and transition while incarcerated? Well, I sought my change before I was locked up. But before I sought that change, I was broke all the way down. I dealt with anger, sadness. I had suicidal thoughts. Prison was my greatest fear, and I didn't want to hurt nobody. But I knew that if it came down to it, I would defend myself. But at the same time, I didn't want to, because the gun violence was something that I didn't want to be a part of. I had all the warning signs growing up. I mean, people was telling me, what it was going to come about, but I thought I knew. I thought I could do it different. But, I didn't know that the image that I was projecting was an image that was going to be misinterpreted. Some of the people I may have hung out with, some of the places I hung out at, some things are just unhealthy, and that's just what it is. And it, like I said, it could be relationships. You find yourself linking up with people to where you just really deep down inside know that you don't belong there, and it's okay. So while I was incarcerated, before I was incarcerated, I knew that I was just trying to be a part of something that wasn't me. And it led to resulting in me losing 18 years of my life. But during those 18 years, I had to evaluate me for who I was, and to know that the first thing I had to do was change my perspective of how I think this world is. So the first thing I did really is I gave my life to the Lord, and I just started applying biblical principles. And the reason why I did that is because in my best knowledge, the best example that I was able to set, it led to me going to prison. So I needed a higher enlightened to see what I couldn't see. I always believed that Jesus was real. I always did. I mean, even way when I was yay high, I always believed that there was something greater than me. So the first thing I did was I gave my life over to the Lord, and I started to apply His biblical principle to my life. And based on that, my thought process transition would cause me to transition. Okay. What was my thought process leaving jail for 35 years? Again, I did 18 years on 35. So my thought process was to have a plan. My thought process was to be honest and know that I was going to face adversity. I had supporters and stuff, but I also knew that my supporters wasn't my carriers. And what I mean by that is I knew that my supporters was not going to take care of me. They was going to support me, which means that I had to actually do some standing on my own. And at the moments that I couldn't stand or whatever, then my supporters would be there to bear the extra weight. But for the most part, I had to do my part, which was to develop a different mindset, to come up with what I called a foolproof plan. To know that worst case scenario, if I had to live in a shelter getting out of prison, I would have to live in a shelter. And I was just ready to embrace whatever adversity I had to deal with. I knew as far as when it came to jobs, being denied as felons and as a felon, and being denied housing because I'm a felon, I knew that it wasn't going to be easy. So for that reason, I had prepared myself to utilize my PO. A lot of people ran from their POs and didn't like their PO. I looked to my PO for advice, because it's like if you're here to guide me or to make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, where this, in the best of my knowledge, I can't find nothing. Can you help me search out some resources? So, and they did. I never had a problem with any of my POs. because I let them know that they're there, I'm here, and if I can't find anything, help me find something. Because again, even at my age I am now, I don't know everything. Okay, so again, thinking about now and when you were 14 years old, what would you tell your younger self? I tell my younger self that it's more to life than what you see outside the window. A lot of the things that a lot of things we fall to are the things that we give too much power to. It could be an Instagram photo. You know, people can have stuff on their Instagram or their Facebook or social media that everything is all well and it's not. You know, but it could set a standard in the mind of somebody else that's younger or just less informed. Um, it could set a mindset to them that the outside world is perfect or that everybody else is living this glamorous life except for you. And it can make them develop a mindset of inadequacy because they're not measuring up to what they see on social media, which further provokes them to go out and try to get what they see other people really don't have. You know, so I would tell my younger self, you know, do the best you can. Everything is not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. Uh, Always seek honest advice. If you feel like there's places you don't want to be or you shouldn't be, it's okay. I would tell my younger self that you don't have to deal with nothing that you don't want to deal with. But at the same time, you have to be able to identify if you're running from something. Because if you move from one job to another job, then from that job to another job, and all your supervisors are horrible, it may not be the supervisor. It may be the fact that one just may not don't have respect for authority. One may feel like they not talking to them a specific type of way. Regardless of our supervisors and people that we have to answer to, they are still held to a certain standard. But at the same time, some of the things that we come in contact with are also tools to humble us as well, especially as believers in Christ. A lot of times we don't realize that as believers in Christ, we see a lot more, which makes our life a little more harder. And it's because we know what we should and should not be doing versus not being enlightened and thinking that everything around you is okay. But on the outside looking in, you know, a person might believe that you know, things could be better than what it was, and that we can find ourselves being comfortable in our mess. So that's what I would tell my 14-year-old self. During my incarceration, just one more point that I meant to touch on. During my incarceration, I looked at my father as being my God. So one of my major turning points was when I had lost him in 2004. I was just over 3.5 years incarcerated. And I used to look at my father for he was my provider, my advisor, and my protector. So when he died in 2004, I got really angry and I was mad at everybody. Because I felt like everybody put me in that position. It wasn't until I realized that my own actions put me in that position to where I was able to release the anger that I had towards everybody else. You know, trying to play the blame game. You know, a lot of times we find ourselves in a situation and we want to blame other people for not being there. When really, if it wasn't for our own decisions or our own actions, we wouldn't have been there. But anyway, it wasn't until my father died to where I had to really look at myself. And I remember just praying, being mad, angry at God, and just telling the Lord, you know, Lord, you took my dad and he was my advisor, he was my provider, he was protecting me, Lord. Now what am I going to do? Now who am I going to talk to when I have issues? Because at that point in time, there were no more older guys around. So I was like, okay, so I'm like, okay, Lord, now who am I supposed to talk to? And he told me, talk to me. You know, so I've just been trusting in him ever since. He has blessed me with the ability to see my own flaws and to understand that we are flawed. You know, in this life, nothing is perfect. the Bible talks about us going on and being perfected. We won't become perfect until we receive our glorified bodies. But until then, we're going to have trials and tribulations. Until then, we're going to make mistakes. Until then, we're going to see evil in the community. A lot of us have to stop being afraid to just intervene. A lot of us are afraid to intervene because we feel like it's not our business until it's our business. And then we want everybody else to intervene. We want everybody else to give all the information they know about what happened when it hits home. But when it's somebody else, we just walk away from it. A number of times I have been out in public places to where people was getting out of hand and people was just ready to just watch it go down. But me being there, it wasn't the matter of me getting into people's business. It was just a matter of this person that's starting to act out was actually hurt and felt offended. But all I told him was, it's okay. It's okay. And I just let him know that we don't know what another person is going through. But instead of us intervening and trying to keep the peace or whatever, a lot of us want to pull out our phones and take pictures and post it on social media as a we want to further this violence. We want to further this stuff just to try to get hits and likes, and we think it's funny. Until it's our children that's getting beat up on social media. Until it's our family that's getting shot dead in their homes, execution style. And there's something wrong with that. It's not a political party problem. It's a personal problem. It's a sin problem. We complain and complain and we look for other entities to help us out. When really, if we want something to do about it, we have to do it ourselves. So that's why I do what I do, especially with the youth mentoring. I just thank the Lord for using me. Been through a lot. Again, I hope I answered all your questions, Miss Lakeisha Reed. And if anyone else have any more questions, you can post them on YouTube, and I'll get back to you. Thanks.